A dying man entered my confessional and told me he was responsible for sending an innocent person to prison for murder 20 years ago. As a priest, I was bound by sacred vows never to reveal what I heard. But as I learned more about the case, I realized I had to find a way to get justice without breaking my oath to God. Before we dive into this incredible story, I'd love to know, where are you watching this from? Drop it in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe for more amazing stories every day. Now let me take you back to the night that tested everything I believed about faith, justice, and moral obligation. The confessional booth at St. Mary's had heard thousands of secrets over the decades, but none had ever kept me awake at night like the one I heard on that rainy Tuesday evening in October. I'd been the parish priest in this small town for 20 years, and I thought I'd heard every kind of human failing, every variety of guilt and regret that could weigh on a soul. I was wrong. It was nearly 9 o'clock, well past our usual confession hours, when I heard the heavy wooden door of the confessional creak open. I'd been about to lock up the church for the night, but something made me pause, made me settle back into the familiar wooden seat behind the screen. "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned." The voice was weak, raspy, the voice of a man who was clearly very ill. I could hear labored breathing, the occasional cough that spoke of serious illness. "How long has it been since your last confession?" I asked gently. 20 years, Father. 20 long years." I waited in the darkness, listening to the rain against the stained glass windows, giving him time to find his words. "Father, I'm dying. Cancer. The doctors say I have maybe 2 weeks left." "I'm sorry to hear that, my son. Is there something weighing on your heart that you'd like to share?" The silence stretched so long I wondered if he'd changed his mind, if he'd simply gotten up and left. Then I heard him take a shuddering breath. "Father, I destroyed an innocent man's life. I let him go to prison for something he didn't do, and I've been living with that knowledge for 20 years. My blood ran cold. In 20 years of hearing confessions, I'd never had anyone confess to a crime of this magnitude. "Tell me what happened," I said softly. 20 years ago, my son was driving drunk. He was 19, just a kid, but he'd been drinking at a party. He hit a woman, a young mother walking home from work, killed her instantly." I felt my stomach clench. I remembered that case. I had just moved here. Marion Stevens, 26 years old, mother of a 4-year-old daughter. She'd been walking home from her job at the diner when she was struck and killed in a hit-and-run. The case had shaken our small town. My son came home that night terrified, his car damaged. He told me what happened, begged me to help him, and God forgive me, I helped him cover it up." "How?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "I had money, Father, influence. I knew people in the police department, in the district attorney's office. I made some calls, pulled some strings. There was a man, Jacob Morrison, who had a record. Petty theft, some drug charges. He lived near where the accident happened, and he didn't have an alibi for that night." Jacob Morrison. I remembered him too. A troubled man who'd been trying to turn his life around, working odd jobs and staying clean. He'd been convicted of vehicular manslaughter and sentenced to 25 years in prison. "You framed an innocent man?" "I planted evidence. I had my son's damaged car repaired in secret and arranged for Jacob's car to show signs of the impact. I paid witnesses to place Jacob in the area at the time of the accident. I used my connections to ensure the investigation pointed toward him and away from my son." I sat in stunned silence, trying to process what I was hearing. This man had orchestrated an elaborate frame-up that had sent an innocent person to prison for 2 decades. "What happened to your son?" I asked. The man's voice broke.
He couldn't live with it, Father. The guilt ate him alive. He started drinking more, using drugs, couldn't hold a job or maintain relationships. He tried to confess several times, but I always talked him out of it, convinced him it would destroy both our lives. And he died 8 years ago, left a note saying he couldn't live with what we'd done anymore, said he was sorry for being a coward, sorry for letting an innocent man rot in prison while he walked free. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. 3 lives destroyed. Marion Stevens, the innocent victim. This man's son consumed by guilt. And Jacob Morrison, still sitting in prison for a crime he didn't commit. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because I'm dying, Father, and I can't face God with this on my soul. Because Jacob Morrison is still in prison, and his life has been stolen from him. Because Marion Stevens' daughter grew up without her mother, believing that justice had been served when it hadn't." "Have you considered going to the police? Confessing publicly?" I thought about it, but Father, I'm a coward just like my son said. I'm afraid of what it would mean for my family, for my reputation. I built a business empire, employed hundreds of people. If this comes out... "Your reputation matters more than an innocent man's freedom?" "No, Father. That's why I'm here. I know what I have to do, but I'm not strong enough to do it. I was hoping that maybe you could help me find the courage." I sat in the darkness of the confessional, my mind racing. This was unlike anything I had ever encountered. The seal of confession was absolute. I could never reveal what this man had told me in confession. It was a trust that went back centuries, a promise that allowed people to unburden their souls without fear of worldly consequences. But how could I live with the knowledge that an innocent man was suffering while I remained silent? "What's your name?" I asked. "Harold Whitman." Harold Whitman. I knew the name. He was one of the wealthiest men in the county, owner of several successful businesses, a pillar of the community. He donated generously to various charities over the years, including our church. "Mr. Whitman, I can't force you to confess publicly. That has to be your choice. But I can tell you that carrying this secret to your grave won't bring you peace. True redemption requires action, not just words." "I know, Father, I know, but I'm scared." "What are you more afraid of? Facing the consequences of your actions, or facing God with this unresolved sin on your soul?" Harold was quiet for a long time. "Will you pray for me, Father? Will you pray that I find the strength to do what's right?" "Of course, my son. But Harold, you need to understand something. If you don't find the courage to confess, Jacob Morrison will die in prison for a crime he didn't commit. Marion Stevens' daughter will never know the truth about what happened to her mother. And your son's death will have had no meaning." "I understand, Father." After Harold left, I sat alone in the confessional for over an hour, wrestling with the weight of what I had learned. The seal of confession was one of the most sacred aspects of my priesthood. I could never, under any circumstances, reveal what someone told me in confession. It was a trust that went back centuries, a promise that allowed people to unburden their souls without fear of worldly consequences. But how could I live with the knowledge that an innocent man was suffering while I remained silent?
I spent the next 3 days in prayer and contemplation, hoping that Harold would find the courage to confess publicly. I called the prison chaplain, ostensibly to discuss general ministry matters, but really to learn more about Jacob Morrison's situation. "Jacob's been a model prisoner," the chaplain told me. "Maintains his innocence, but he's never been bitter about it. He's helped other inmates get their GEDs, participate in a Bible study group, works in the prison library. He's up for parole in 5 years, but honestly, Father,
20 years in prison has taken its toll. He's not the same man who went in. Does he have family? A sister who visits occasionally? His parents died while he was inside. He's missed funerals, graduations, weddings, all the milestones of life. If he's innocent, like he claims, it's one of the greatest tragedies I've ever witnessed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Jacob Morrison, about the life that had been stolen from him, about the family he'd never had the chance to build. I thought about Marion Stevens' daughter, now 24 years old, who had grown up believing her mother's killer had been brought to justice. And I thought about Harold Whitman, dying in his mansion, surrounded by wealth built on a foundation of lies and corruption. On Friday, I received a call from the hospital. Harold Whitman had been admitted with complications from this cancer. He was asking for a priest. I found him in a private room, connected to various machines, his face gaunt and pale. His family surrounded his bed: a wife, 2 adult daughters, several grandchildren. They stepped out when I arrived, giving us privacy. "Father Michael," Harold whispered, "thank you for coming." "How are you feeling, Harold?" "Like a man who's running out of time. Father, I've been thinking about what you said, about redemption requiring action. And I want to do the right thing. I want to confess, but I'm terrified of what it will do to my family. My daughters, my grandchildren, they'll have to live with the shame of what I've done." "Harold, your family will have to live with the truth eventually. The question is whether they learn it from you, with the chance to understand and forgive, or whether they discover it some other way, after you're gone." "What if I write a letter, a confession that's opened after my death?" I shook my head. "Jacob Morrison can't wait for you to die, Harold. He's already lost 20 years of his life. Every day you delay is another day stolen from him." "But my family will be stronger for knowing the truth. Harold, you have a chance to teach your children and grandchildren about courage, about taking responsibility for your mistakes, about making things right even when it's difficult. That's a more valuable legacy than any amount of money you could leave them." Harold closed his eyes, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I don't know if I can do it, Father." "Then let me help you. Let me call the district attorney, arrange for someone to come here and take your statement." "You would do that?" "I can't reveal what you told me in confession, but I can help facilitate your decision to confess publicly. The choice has to be yours, but I can make the process easier." Harold was quiet for a long time. The only sound in the room was the beeping of his heart monitor. Finally, he opened his eyes and looked at me. "Okay, Father. Call them. It's time to tell the truth." I felt a surge of relief mixed with apprehension. "Are you absolutely certain, Harold? Once we make these calls, there's no going back." "I'm certain. I should have done this 20 years ago. Every day I waited was another day stolen from Jacob Morrison's life." "I'll make the calls right now," I said, standing up. "Harold, you're doing the right thing. It takes courage to face the truth after all these years." "Father," Harold said, gripping my hand weakly, "if something happens to me before they get here, promise me you'll find a way to help Jacob. I know you can't break the seal of confession, but promise me you'll find another way." "Nothing's going to happen, Harold. You're going to tell them everything, and Jacob Morrison is going to get the justice he deserves. Promise me, Father, please."
I promise I'll do everything I can within my vows to see that justice is served." Harold smiled weakly and squeezed my hand. "Thank you, Father. That gives me peace." I spent the next 45 minutes in the hospital's family consultation room making phone calls. I contacted the district attorney's office first. "Father Michael, from St. Mary's," I said when I was connected to D.A. Williams. "I have a parishioner who wants to provide crucial information about the Marion Stevens murder case from 20 years ago." "The Jacob Morrison conviction? Father, that case was closed decades ago." "This man claims Morrison is innocent and that there was a miscarriage of justice. He's dying and wants to confess what he knows before it's too late." "What's his name?" I hesitated. "Harold Whitman." "The Harold Whitman? The businessman?" "Father, I'll be there within 90 minutes. I'm bringing Detective Bryant from our cold case unit. Don't let him talk to anyone else until we arrive." When I returned to Harold's room, I found chaos. Medical equipment surrounded his bed, and a team of doctors and nurses were working frantically. Harold's family stood pressed against the wall, Margaret crying while their daughters held each other. Dr. Patterson looked up as I entered. "Father, I'm sorry. Mr. Whitman went into cardiac arrest about 10 minutes ago. We did everything we could, but—" "He's gone?" I whispered. "I'm afraid so." His heart gave out. I stared at Harold's still form, feeling the weight of his unspoken confession settling on my shoulders like a lead blanket. He had died with his secret, and now I was the only person alive who knew the truth about Jacob Morrison's innocence. Margaret approached me, her face streaked with tears. "Father, Harold was so agitated before you left. He kept saying he had to tell someone the truth about something that happened 20 years ago. Do you know what he meant?" Before I could answer, D.A. Williams and Detective Bryant arrived. They looked around the room, taking in the grieving family and the covered body. "Father Michael," D.A. Williams said, "I understand Mr. Whitman wanted to provide information about a criminal case." I felt the weight of the seal of confession pressing down on me like a physical force. "I am sorry, but Mr. Whitman passed away before you arrived." "But surely you can tell us what he wanted to say. If it was about a criminal matter—" "I cannot reveal what Mr. Whitman shared with me in confidence," I said firmly. "The seal of confession is absolute. That information died with him." Detective Bryant stepped forward. "Father, we understand your religious obligations, but if an innocent man is in prison, I understand your frustration, but my vows are sacred and inviolable. I cannot reveal what was shared with me in confession, no matter the circumstances."
D.A. Williams looked incredulous. "So you're telling me that a prominent businessman called us here to confess to knowledge about a 20-year-old murder case, and now that he's dead, you won't tell us what he wanted to say?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you." "This is unbelievable. We could have an innocent man in prison, and you're bound by religious rules?" "I'm bound by sacred vows that I will not break, no matter the circumstances." The officials left, clearly frustrated. Margaret Whitman approached me as they were leaving. "Father, I don't understand what Harold wanted to confess, but if it could help someone, isn't there anything you can do?" "Mrs. Whitman, I made a promise to your husband, and I intend to keep it. I can't tell you how, but I will find a way to honor both my vows and my obligation to justice." That night, I knelt alone in the empty church, wrestling with the terrible knowledge I now carried. Harold's confession echoed in my mind. His son Tommy driving drunk, killing Marion Stevens. Harold using his wealth and influence to frame Jacob Morrison. An innocent man had been in prison for 20 years, and I was the only person who knew the truth. But how could I help Jacob without breaking my sacred vows? The answer came to me gradually. I couldn't reveal what Harold had told me, but I could learn more about Jacob Morrison's situation. I could visit him, offers spiritual guidance, and perhaps find other ways to help the truth emerge. 2 weeks later, I drove to the correctional facility for the first time. The prison was a grim, imposing structure surrounded by high walls and razor wire. I'd arranged to visit Jacob Morrison as part of my ministry to inmates. "Father Michael?" Jacob said when he was brought to the visiting room. He was a man in his late 50s, with graying hair and tired eyes, but there was still dignity in his bearing. "I wasn't expecting a visit from a priest." "I'm here as part of my outreach to inmates, Jacob. I hope you don't mind." "Not at all, Father. It's been a long time since anyone visited me. My sister comes when she can, but she has her own family now." "How long have you been here?" 20 years next month, for something I didn't do." He said it matter-of-factly, without bitterness. "I've maintained my innocence from day one, but after 20 years, most people stop listening." "Tell me about that night, Jacob. What do you remember?" Jacob's eyes grew distant. "September 15th, 20 years ago, I was walking home from my job at the warehouse. I had been clean for 6 months, trying to turn my life around. I heard sirens, saw police cars and an ambulance near 5th and Maple, but I kept walking. Didn't want any trouble." "You didn't see what happened?" "No, Father. I found out the next day that a woman had been killed in a hit and run. 3 days later, the police arrested me, said witnesses had seen me in the area, that paint from my car matched evidence at the scene. But you maintained your innocence." "Of course I did. I may have made mistakes in my life, Father, but I never hurt anyone. Certainly never killed anyone. But I had a record, no alibi, and no money for a good lawyer. The public defender barely spoke to me before the trial." I studied Jacob's face as he spoke. There was pain there, and resignation, but no deception. This was a man telling the truth. "Jacob, in all these years, have you ever wondered who really killed Marion Stevens?" "Every day, Father. Someone got away with murder while I rotted in here. Someone is walking free, living their life, while I lost everything. My parents died while I was inside. I missed their funerals, missed saying goodbye." "That must be incredibly difficult." "It is. But I've learned to find peace in faith, Father. I run a Bible study group here, help other inmates get their GEDs. If I let bitterness consume me, then I'd truly be lost."
I left the prison that day with a heavy heart, knowing that Jacob Morrison was exactly what he claimed to be, an innocent man who had been framed for a crime he didn't commit. Over the following weeks, I continued to visit Jacob, offering spiritual guidance while wrestling with my own moral dilemma. I couldn't reveal Harold's confession, but I found myself praying that somehow the truth would find another way to emerge. My prayers were answered in an unexpected way. 3 months after Harold's death, Detective Bryant called me at the church. "Father Michael, I wanted to update you on something. We've been looking into Harold Whitman's background, trying to understand why he wanted to confess about the Marion Stevens case." "Oh? It's interesting. We discovered that Mr. Whitman made several large cash withdrawals in the weeks following Marion Stevens' death 20 years ago. Tens of thousands of dollars, all in cash." I remained silent, my heart racing. "We also found that his son, Tommy Whitman, took his life 8 years ago. The family kept it quiet, but we obtained a copy of his last note. It mentions guilt over letting an innocent man suffer for something I did." "That's troubling," I said carefully. "Father, I know you can't tell us what Harold Whitman wanted to confess, but these discoveries are making us take a fresh look at the Morrison case. Would you have any objection to us reopening the investigation?" "Detective, I believe justice should always be pursued, regardless of how much time has passed." "Thank you, Father. That's all I needed to hear."
The investigation that followed was swift and thorough. Detective Bryant and her team began by re-examining the evidence from the original case. They discovered that several key witnesses had received large cash payments shortly after Jacob's conviction, payments that could be traced back to Harold Whitman through a series of shell companies. The breakthrough came when they interviewed Garrett Webb, one of the witnesses who had testified that he'd seen Jacob Morrison near the scene of the crime. Webb was now in his 60s, and his conscience had been weighing on him for years. "I lied," Webb admitted when Detective Bryant questioned him. "Harold Whitman paid me $5,000 to say I saw Jacob Morrison that night. I needed the money. My wife was sick, and we couldn't afford her medical bills." "Why are you telling us this now?" "Because I could never forget it and stop feeling guilty about lying. Jacob Morrison never hurt anyone. I don't know who killed that woman, but it wasn't him." Webb's confession opened the floodgates. Other witnesses came forward admitting they had been paid to lie. A former police officer revealed that Harold Whitman had bribed him to plant evidence in Jacob's car. A lab technician confessed to falsifying the paint analysis that had been crucial to Jacob's conviction. The picture that emerged was of a massive conspiracy orchestrated by Harold Whitman to protect his son and frame an innocent man. Harold had used his wealth and influence to corrupt the entire investigation, ensuring that Jacob Morrison would be convicted, while the real killer, his son Tommy, remained free. 6 months after the investigation began, D.A. Williams held a press conference to announce that Jacob Morrison's conviction was being overturned. "New evidence has come to light that proves Mr. Morrison was the victim of a deliberate frame-up. We now know that Harold Whitman orchestrated a conspiracy to protect his son, who was the real driver in Marion Stevens' death. Mr. Morrison will be released immediately, and the state will provide full compensation for this miscarriage of justice."
I was there when Jacob walked out of the correctional facility, a free man for the first time in 20 years. He looked overwhelmed, blinking in the sunlight, as his sister embraced him with tears streaming down her face. "Father Michael," Jacob said when he saw me in the crowd of supporters, "you came." "I wouldn't have missed it, Jacob. How does it feel to be free?" "Surreal, Father. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and find this is all a dream." "It's real, Jacob. The truth finally came out. I heard about Harold Whitman, about what his son did. I feel sorry for that family, you know. They've suffered too in their own way." "That's very gracious of you. I learned a long time ago that bitterness is a prison of its own, Father. I don't want to carry that burden." Later, I arranged a meeting between Jacob and Marion Stevens' daughter, Elena, now 25 and working as a nurse. It was one of the most powerful encounters I've ever witnessed. "I'm so sorry," Elena said, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry that seeking justice for my mother's death caused you so much suffering." Jacob took her hand gently. "You have nothing to apologize for. You were just a child who lost her mother. What happened to me wasn't your fault. It was the fault of people who chose corruption over justice." "Do you really forgive them?" "Forgiveness isn't about excusing what they did," Jacob said. "It's about freeing myself from the burden of hatred. Harold Whitman made terrible choices, but his son paid the ultimate price for those choices. I can't bring anyone back, but I can choose not to let bitterness poison what's left of my life." Margaret Whitman also came to see me, struggling with the revelation of her husband's crimes. "Father, how do I live with the knowledge of what Harold did? How do I face my children and grandchildren, knowing our family name is forever tainted?" "The same way Jacob Morrison lived with 20 years of false imprisonment," I said. "One day at a time, with faith, and by choosing to do good with whatever time and resources you have left." Margaret established a foundation in Marion Steuven's name to help families of wrongful conviction victims and support legal reform efforts. Jacob became an advocate for criminal justice reform, working with the Innocence Project to prevent other wrongful convictions. 2 years after his release, I officiated at Jacob's wedding to a lawyer who specialized in wrongful conviction cases. The ceremony was small, held in the prison chapel where Jacob had found his faith during his darkest years. As I performed the ceremony, I thought about the strange ways that justice and redemption work in our world. Harold Whitman had died with his confession unspoken, but his death had set in motion the investigation that eventually freed Jacob Morrison. His son, Tommy, paid the ultimate price for his guilt, but his note had provided a crucial clue that helped uncover the truth. I never told Jacob or anyone else about Harold's deathbed confession. The seal of confession remained intact, and Harold's secret died with him. But somehow, through the mysterious workings of divine justice, the truth had found its way to light. 5 years later, I received a letter from Jacob. Father Michael, I don't know what role you played in the investigation that freed me, but I want you to know that your visits in prison meant everything to me. You helped me keep faith that the truth would eventually come out. I had learned that sometimes the most important work happens in ways we never expect. Harold's confession had died with him, but the seeds of truth he had planted continued to grow, eventually blossoming into the justice that set Jacob Morrison free.
The confessional at St. Mary's continued to hear secrets, but I never forgot the night when a dying man's confession set in motion a chain of events that would eventually right a terrible wrong, even though he didn't live to see it happen himself. Sometimes the most sacred secrets find their own way to light, and sometimes the greatest act of faith is trusting that truth and justice will prevail, even when we can't see how. An absolutely powerful story about moral dilemmas, the weight of secrets, and how truth has a way of emerging even when it seems buried forever. If this story of faith, justice, and the mysterious ways truth finds its way to light moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories about moral courage and divine justice. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.